everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Audio Tools Explained. Today is another episode based on a more creative effect called the Flanger. Similar to the phaser that we explored last week in our last episode, the Flanger is a more creative effect that takes your original signal, and basically what it does is it introduces a whole bunch of notches and boosts in your frequency spectrum to kind of give you this really, really weird jet whooshing effect or like a draining effect, something like that. It's very similar to the phaser in terms of the final sound that is produced, but it produces it differently and it produces a different set of qualities in your audio spectrum. I'm going to be using the stock plugin that Nuendo comes with again. Unfortunately for this plugin, I don't have a third-party plugin that I'd be able to show you to compare with, but I do have the stock plugin here, so we're going to hop into the explanation of how this works before we go through the knobs here. So basically what happens when you put your audio signal through a phaser is it duplicates that signal and delays it slightly and at a varying length of delay. So imagine you have a guitar signal, such as the one I have here, and you put it through the flanger. The flanger is immediately going to output the original version of that signal, and it's also going to replicate that signal and slightly delay it by a few milliseconds. Or some flangers, such as the one I have here, actually has the option to change the base amount of delay. So it's going to take that duplicate signal, it's going to delay it, and then it's going to take that delayed signal and gradually change the amount of time that it is delayed. So say I have it delayed to 5 milliseconds. Think of the 5 milliseconds as the center point for where that delayed signal starts. And what it's going to do is it's going to take that delayed signal and move it so that it is less than 5 milliseconds. It's going to move it slowly, so it's going to go from 5 milliseconds, maybe it's going to go up to 4 or 3, and it's going to go back down, come to 5 milliseconds again, and it's going to come further down, maybe to like 7 or 8, or however your flanger works. All of them operate slightly differently, but they all produce the same effect. And it creates this kind of jet swooshing effect, very similar to a phaser, because what it is doing, that duplicate signal, is creating phasing with your original signal, and it's cutting out certain frequencies, boosting others, and it's playing with your frequency spectrum in a really, really unique way. So let's hop into the knobs here and just explore what each of them does and how they will affect your sound. I've actually loaded this flanger up on the Serum bass that I used to explain last week's phaser plugin, so we're going to be exploring it there. So you have, right off the bat, in the very middle, you have a rate dial. This can be synced or not synced to the tempo of your DAW. You can change the rate up and down, and basically when you're changing the rate, you're changing the speed at which that delayed signal is modulated. So if I have a slower rate, say 1 hertz or 0.6, let's go 1, it's basically going to start at my 5 millisecond delay, and over the course of a 1 hertz cycle, it is going to go up and then back down. If I were to make this really, really fast, say 5 hertz, it's going to go up and down faster. So it's going to go 5 times as fast. Just to show you an example of this, I'm going to turn our phaser on. I'm going to turn everything up to about 50% just so that we can have a good demonstration. Except for the mix, I'm going to leave that at 100. And I'm going to have this bypass first so you can hear what our original signal sounds like. So that is our original signal. Now I'm going to unbypass the flanger, And I've put it down to, let's put it even lower. Let's put it at 0.5 hertz so you can really hear the time it takes for that signal to modulate. So that is with the signal being duplicated and delayed 5 milliseconds, with that 5 millisecond delay being modulated by a rate of 0.5 hertz. Now I'm going to play it back again with the rate being changed as it's being played back so that you can really hear what I mean when I say that the delayed signal is being modulated up and down in terms of how long it's being delayed. Very similar effect to how a phaser would produce, but you can hear it has a different tonality because whereas a phaser will only cut out certain frequencies, a flanger will cut and boost certain frequencies because it's creating a phasing effect with the signals. I'm going to leave it synced to a whole note right now so that we can hear the effects that are being explained as they're happening. So very similar to the other Nuendo stock plugins that I've introduced, it has a low and a high filter. We're going to leave those alone for now because they're just regular filters. Over on the left, in the top left here, we have the other main knob that you should focus on when adjusting your flanger plugins or flanger pedals is your delay. So like I said, this delay knob is where it's going to position the center for the amount of delay that the duplicate signal is being pushed back. Basically, you can think of the delay knob as a flanger amount. The more you delay it, the more it's going to create more phasing issues. I'm going to turn everything to 50 here again-ish. I'm going to turn the delay down to 0.1 milliseconds. You won't hear the phaser doing its job here because it's only being delayed by 0.1 milliseconds, but I'm going to adjust it as it's being played back and you can really hear it. So you can really hear how as I adjusted the delay up and down, the more delay there was, the more phasing issues we'd get and the more the flanger would play around with the audio spectrum. Now we also have this feedback knob here, and this is a really interesting effect that you can add on to your flangers. Basically what this does is it takes some of the signal, feeds it back in, and it creates even more sort of boosts and cuts that will play with your audio spectrum. I'll turn it down to 0 and I'll modulate it as we go through and you'll hear what it's doing. You can hear that with very, very little feedback, the flanger isn't really producing any of the flange that it is designed to, because without the feedback, it's not really creating as many dynamic boosts and cuts as it's designed to be. For the flanger I'm running here, a really good stock setting for the feedback is just around 50%. And you can hear as I got really, really high, or between 90 and 100, it just kept creating more and more feedback, and it got not so much musical as it was just annoying. So be careful with this one, because too low and your flanger won't really do anything, too high and you'll create you'll just create a feedback loop. I'd say between like 20 and 80 is where you should normally play around with. In terms of percentage, the flanger you're playing with might have a different setting for this, so play around with it, learn what it does, use your ears, I know. But really just learn your plugins that you have available. Another knob that this flanger has is this spatial knob here, and this can be thought of as a stereo knob, because what it does is it creates either a mono signal to a stereo signal. If I were to turn this all the way down to 0%, the output signal that this flanger would produce would be a mono signal. If I were to turn it up all the way to 100, it would be a completely stereo signal. I'll demonstrate this really quick. Down to 0. and up to 100. Depending on the effect that you're going for or what you want your audio signal to sound like, at the end of the day, you can either have a mono flanger or a stereo flanger. So this particular flanger that I'm using with Nuendo also has these two options down at the very bottom, the low and the high range. These are just more modulation options that you can use to play around with in how it's delaying the signal. It will change the range of how low it will go and how high it will go in terms of the delay that it is modulating your signal with. It doesn't give you milliseconds, but it gives you percents, and you can play around with the percent values and figure out how much it's changing the delay. If you play with these and have your sounds playing, you really hear the difference. I'll just turn them both down to 0 and modulate them as we go through, and you'll really hear the difference here. So that's all there really is to a flanger, guys. I hope you found this very informative. It's a very simple plugin, very popular with the guitar effects and synthetic instruments, but it can also be very useful for mixing and very useful for just getting creative with your other sounds. So explore it. I hope you had a good time learning about it, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.